Okay, my topic is evolution of the PCs. How PC came here, how they started. Some background. IBM, IBM was the god in 1975. Everyone was used to respect IBM because it was called Big Blue. It was the biggest company there, and there was no other company which dominated the world. So after that, in 1975, there was the first. It was the first personal computer known as IBM 8800, and it was developed by Ed Roberts, an ex-Air Force officer. So this was developed by MITS. It was a calculator company. You can see, that was the first personal computer with only switches, no display, no keyboard. You have to feed the input using flipping the switches. So now came Microsoft. Microsoft developed an interpreter for the Altair computer. Because of the interpreter, Altair got famous because instead of feeding bits, I can feed it using the basic language. So now came Apple computer. Apple computer was released in 1976. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who were the founder, they wanted to develop something crazy or better. So they developed Apple One, which was just a chip, nothing else. We had to connect the keyboard and the display for it. And then they wanted to create something which could be sold. So Steve Jobs came with an idea of Apple II. This was his first vision of a computer. This could be a computer, and we can just attach a monitor and a combined, awesomely compressed package known as Apple II. And they sold 1,000 pieces in a single, in the first year. So VisiCalc was the first actual application, business application developed by Dan Prickling and Bob Frankston, which maybe everybody has forgot them. This was the application which made Apple II successful. So now IBM couldn't sit down and they could wait that PC industry would grow and dominate them. So they came with the first idea of the first PC. Bill Lowe was the head of the IBM PC department, and he challenged that he will create a PC in a single year. But they didn't have any hardware or software. So they bought hardware. The only hardware they had in the first PC was the ROM BIOS, except that everything was bought from somebody else. So they wanted software, the operating system and the programming language. So there were two options, either Gary Kilter, who developed the first PC OS called CPM, or Bill Gates, who was the developer of BASIC, the interpreter of BASIC. So they went to Bill Gates because it was a smaller company and they were developing good software. But Gary Kilter, then he rejected them because of some work. So they came to Bill Gates, and Bill Gates bought a software operating system called DOS from Tim Patterson from SCP for $50,000, and they sold it for $50 per PC, and they sold almost millions of DOS. So the income was around billions, which they bought for $50,000. Lotus was the first killer app for IBM PC. So Lotus was worth 150 million in a single year because of IBM PC and their app. So of course there was some competition. Clone makers started rising. Compaq was the first biggest clone maker. They reverse engineered IBM PC's BIOS, and they developed a 100% compatible PC with IBM PC. There was the highest business record by selling $111 million something. And the most profitable organization in this was the Intel, because every clone maker and of course IBM used to take chips from Intel. Intel was equivalent to PC that time because they were going smaller, cheaper and quicker, giving smaller, cheaper and quicker chips. So now IBM wanted to develop some, because there was so much competition, they wanted to develop some closed PC, which IBM PC was not previously. So they wanted their own OS, which they wanted to develop from Microsoft itself, who developed DOS for them. But then started a conflict between Microsoft and IBM because of PARC was the research center, Palo Alto Research Center, where actually the first PC was developed in 1973 and not in 1975. It was the first PC with a graphical user interface, and Steve Jobs saw it there because he got an invitation from Xerox at PARC, and he thought that this was the future of personal computer. GUI is the future of personal computer. So he brought the whole team. He demanded Xerox that I wanted to see the GUI, and he then came with an idea called Lisa. Lisa was the first actual GUI computer, but it costed around $10,000. So it was a huge failure. Means nobody bought Lisa. There were no applications, and Apple was losing its position, which they got because of Apple II. Then Jobs came with an idea called Mac. He developed a cheaper OS and with the same hardware of Lisa. It was though costlier than IBM PC, but it was around $3,500, which was the best GUI at that age. So, but there was no business application. There was only Mac Paint and Mac Write. So there was no CASI. But Adobe developed a software called them. Then there was a conflict between Windows and Macintosh because Windows was developing. Though Windows was poor initially, not compared to Mac, but they grew better and better. But after that, Mac thought that every feature they are implementing is copied from Mac. So there was a legal case for 6 years which Microsoft won finally. And this is Windows 95, which Microsoft came with Windows 95 in 95. And the opening ceremony was grand. It was worth $300 million. And Windows 95 created an industry standard. So it combined first. It was the first thing which combined GUI and OS in a single package. So this was only for 20 years because I had only 20 slides. So this was it. Revolution of the PC.